Hello and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Conversations on leadership, life and the lessons we learn, often the hard way. This week, we're inviting you to pause, take a breath and consider a different way of leading, one that doesn't rely on being constantly on. I am joined by Samantha Garstin, also known as the Period Princess, to explore what happens when we lead in rhythm with the cycles that shape our energy, our focus and our capacity. While some cycles may seem rather more specific to some rather than all, I can assure you that this conversation is very much for everyone. Because we all move through cycles of energy and rest, growth and retreat, clarity and confusion, whether you notice your own tides daily, weekly, seasonally, or emotionally, or even not. This episode is about learning to tune into those patterns and use them strategically in how we lead both ourselves and others. So, if you've ever felt burned by hustle culture or caught in an always-on loop, this one's for you. Join us for Being Moonlit or something else and discover how honouring your natural rhythm might just be the most powerful leadership move you can make. Samantha, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. And I get to talk about my favourite things. So, yeah, very excited.
Which is
to be
amazing.
Here.
So, very amazing indeed. So, I have merely said the words Samantha Garstin and Period Princess, but this is now your opportunity to introduce yourself in the way that you would like the audience to know all about you. So, over to you.
Thank you. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. If you found me ever on LinkedIn, I am the Period Princess, sometimes known by that rather than just my name. And what that really means is I'm a menstrual wellness educator. So I'm an inclusion specialist. I normally work with organisations to kind of bin the shame and taboo that we have around menstrual cycles and have better conversations. It's my mission to change the conversation around being in a body that bleeds and to make space for everybody and brain, because I would also say my side niche is looking specifically at the intersection of neurodivergent traits and hormonal shifts, so everybody and brain, allowing
Love
them
that.
the space to sort of shine in ways that make sense for them. So yeah, that's the longer bit.
Fabulous and not long at all. I'm also intrigued that you won't have always have been the Period Princess. There was something before you took this as being part and parcel of who you now most firmly are. You know, I've heard you speak more than once now. We've been on a panel together, which was utterly amazing. And so I've heard lots of what you talk about, but I know that that equally isn't where you started. So there potentially have been more traditional style leadership elements and all the rest of it. And I'm just wondering, because we're talking so much on this season about change and transition, if you could say something about how you have arrived at the things that you're doing now.
Definitely. So now, now that I recognise my own neurodivergence, I look back with different eyes when I look back at my story. I've been everywhere from waitress. I ended up as a sous chef. I worked my way through the ranks. Decided hospitality was not for me. It's not for spicy energy. I burnt out massively. I had a 30, what did I call it? A 30 life crisis, and pivoted to work within more like 9 to 5 roles. And I ended up as head of sales and marketing in a small family company. So when I say head, I mean there wasn't a whole bunch of people underneath me because it was quite a small company. But it was definitely very in the 9 to 5 realms, which was something that I hadn't like previously done. And I was all right there. I mean, it was nice, like the people were nice, but it really did not set my soul on fire. And then, which I didn't realize at the time, ADHD probably got in the picture, and it was just like, we're done with this now. We love yoga. Let's go and do that. So I left my job to skip off into Portugal to do my yoga teacher training, which was incredible. And when I was there, we learned about many things, but Ayurvedic cycles. This was this pivotal moment where we looked within that at the menstrual cycle, and I understood that my cycle was more than just my period, which I'd never really considered before, and actually that we had all these different energies that cycled all month. And I was like, oh, I've massively misunderstood that about myself and myself within the world and doing what I do. And now it makes sense, like, why I burnt out quite so hard. So yeah, it's been varied.
My God, I don't know that we've ever touched on that, because I ended up with 2.5, 3 years in hospitality during COVID, which was quite enough. Yeah. But again, I don't know about you, but I'm a firm believer in things happening for a reason. And with whatever background I had come from, to have entered the world of hospitality, which, as I said in the introduction, is an industry that is always on, always on, that try to bring us something of the different roles I'd actually had and in the industry. Of course, I equally was not thinking in terms of cycles when I went through that. But I'm so interested in what you are bringing to organisations now. And I think when we first met, I said, oh, it's a bit late for me. And you said, no, it isn't, because there are this whole element about all sorts of different cycles around us. And, you know, as I said again in the intro, this episode is for everybody. And I think when we were toying with this, you coming in and doing an episode with me, we talked about energy management, didn't we? And so I'm interested to know about how you get into this within organisations. Do you just go full on with I am the period princess and that's what I'm here to talk about? Or do you end up finding that you are talking about different forms of cycles, different forms of energy flow, which actually then, because you say that you're the inclusion specialist, how do you go? I'm really interested in how you go about making sure that everybody is included in the conversations that you have.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a while of refining things down. I think actually because I've had such a varied work history from hospitality, from front of house to back of house, it is on all the time. And particularly in the kitchen was very male dominated. I have a very, I think, a unique understanding of like two very different industries and how actually there are certain accommodations that will work in one that will not work in another, along with my own sort of personal experiences of, you know, I was on the pill and the coil for many years, like understanding that complete disconnect from our bodies that we might experience during that, which only goes to kind of make it worse in terms of when we don't have those signals from our bodies, like periods and things, we're not in tune with our cycles. So we end up sort of, like I said, carting our bodies around like meat suits along for the ride, living from the neck up, like never really being conscious of what we're carrying around.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those experiences have kind of given me quite, I think, a full perspective of like how to word things, include things in different ways to make it accessible for different people and different roles. But I mean, I would say definitely the people that I do end up working with are more progressive in nature, and I feel that's incredible to already work with organizations that are quite progressive in their thinking. And so it isn't there aren't so many like major organizational shifts. It's opening a conversation and trusting that I know that they're going to take it from there and keep doing the work, building, you know, more psychologically safe workspaces. Other than that, I mean, it's still work. It's still my
Yeah.
work to sort of bring it into sort of, I've had conversations with less progressive organizations, and I think things like competing priorities within the business, or like priorities going to more like business critical things, means that I guess you could say I was a fluffy provider, if you like, in terms of things that like need to get done. And sometimes there are like things that are prioritized above that, but I still keep having the conversations. I keep
Yeah.
putting the word out there about that these things they're not fluffy actually. They affect, I think it's 52% of like most workforces will be people who have periods, and that's a large part of an organization to be ignored. And actually there are really detrimental, like, financial costs as well, in terms of, like, not motivation. My words are going. It's very late cycle for me. The brain fog is strong.
The brain fog, yeah.
Yeah, motivational factors at least.
Yeah.
And morale. That's the word I wanted. I knew it began with an M. I got there in the end. So yeah.
I could have tried to guess, but that probably wouldn't have been a good idea. I don't, because you use the word fluffy, but as we are both very aware, to spell fluffy, you have to use FU.
Yep.
Just putting that out there. And, we've explored this a little bit before when we've actually spoken, but I think it's worth just saying this again, that I know that we have talked about cycles being strategic. And if I think about when Bridge and I are planning on putting this episode out, we've called it being Moonlit because it's going to coincide with the buck moon, the full moon. And when I started looking at that, and I'm not saying to chief execs and leaders out there right now, right, okay, strategically, you should be following a moon cycle. But it is back, isn't it, to being a moon cycle, a lunar cycle, the menstrual cycle, whatever. Whether we like it or not, the world works in rhythms, and businesses work in rhythms. And when I read up about the buck moon, the full moon, the values and the characteristics of it are around determination, progress, purposeful growth. So that for me are all strategic words. So it's not something that you're likely to lead with, but it's detachment of how you're feeling or what's going on. So for those of us or whoever may well be on the pill or wearing a coil, it's another form of masking. It's another form of masking how you're really feeling. It's not going through the sort of like what the body is having happen. But I'm still so interested in that, how we bring those sort of like elements or those cycles to life for people in businesses who are going to be saying that doesn't happen for me. When we know that there is such a large percentage of the workforce who are people who bleed, I'm going to say that rather than female, rather than being that distinctive, to bring that level of inclusivity in. But you can't just deny the fact that affects people's energy. And even if you are not somebody who bleeds, your energy is different from one day to the next, from 1 week to the next. And so you have to get out of your head to be able to establish that, and when the best work can get done, right?
Like, absolutely. So I think we become very detached from not just the rhythms of our body, but the rhythms of the world. The working world has a very linear kind of, it's a rinse and repeat energy. That is because the world of work was designed before women and people with periods were in the workforce, and there's no shade there. That's just a fact. And then we have this grind culture. We wake up, we do the thing, we go home, we wake up, we do the thing, we go home. And at no point, within that kind of grind culture model, is there space for anything else. It's productivity driven, and that just takes us so far away from anything else, and the expectations are so great. And I think particularly now more than ever, they're so great for us to keep on within the machine. And whether that's cost of living things, like financial things, are just driving people to work harder and harder than they ever have, just to keep afloat. But it's almost like a false economy, because if we push hard in one area and we don't have time, it will get us in the end. And our bodies, particularly as you're working somatics, our bodies will stop us if we keep pushing through. At some point our bodies will be like, hey, okay, we're going to be really ill now, you're not going to get out of bed for a long time. And so I think actually it's just that we've become so removed from things. But, we're wrapped in cycles, like you were saying, our life cycle from when we're born to death, that is a cycle, and everything within that is wrapped in cycles. The different life phases that we go through. We've got the seasons, we've got the month, then you can start getting even smaller. With the month, we've got the lunar cycle, then we've got a cycle of a week even, and then our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle. That's not a fluffy woo-woo thing. That is science, that is fact, the rising sun triggers cortisol, which helps us get up in the morning. Low light triggers melatonin, that helps us go to sleep at night. We are wrapped in these cycles, and the world we live in drives us further and further and further away from them, but we can't escape them. If you look at the way, the workplace works in quarters, Q1, Q2, there are certain things that are done in those quarters that are not done at other times, because that's the cycle that we're in. So actually, even though it sounds on the front of it like whatever you want to use, fluffy, woo, like, a little bit like, that doesn't apply, that's not going to work. We're all wrapped in these cycles. Whatever body you have, whatever, it drives those cycles, whether it's testosterone or estrogen, progesterone, they impact us. And by not listening to those, like the symptoms and signals, that's our body's love language, is the way it talks to us with its symptoms and signals. And so to ignore them just drives us further and further away from who we are at our core, drives us further away from peace and happiness, and closer to exhaustion, burnout, illness. I feel like I'm going on a rant now.
No, you're not. It's all so interesting, because I'm sitting here thinking about, I probably for 300 years, and I sort of like needed a Samantha Garstin in my life much sooner than I actually found her. When I think back now, and it's interesting because you can get into narratives, can't you? So I have the most terrible November, and I can remember it for as long as I can remember, that I'm often poorly. I'm really worn out. I'm panicking about Christmas and everything that needs to get done before the end of a year. And when I think about that for myself personally, but I then also think about that from a work perspective as well, when you're talking about like quarters, how often there is this inordinate race from August onwards for prepping budgets and what the next year is going to look like. And you're thinking, Jesus, I'm hardly into this year before I've got to think about the next one. And you deplete. And when everything is sort of like often coming to a head is the moment when really you should be in hibernation. And that's what it feels like. Yeah. And then there's meant to be this inordinate new verve that you arrive in January with, totally purposeful, ready for the year ahead. When you realise that half of the things that you'd thought about in August have not come to pass because it's so out of line with what's actually now happening with the world. And so I think I say all of that just in total agreement with that there are all sorts of things going on for a person individually that then comes clashing up against the way an organisation works, and lots of them work in that way. So I'm wondering, with the progressive organisations that you have been working in, what do you bring in for them practically so that they begin to appreciate that whilst they might not lead with cycles, that they are acknowledging that they are there, that you can't get away from them, and the practicality of what you may well then be supporting them putting in place to make the workplace different?
Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a two-part conversation, really. There's two things that I like to do. One is to give what I call the missing education we never got in school. When I had that aha moment in my yoga teacher training, I was 38 years old. And I'm not going to lie, a little bit ashamed that I didn't know that about my body at 38. That there were these different phases of energy. So the first part is to communicate that and deliver that in a way that's accessible, really tangible to understand. And I have a framework that I use for that. And so, because before you're going to implement anything to an organization, say like a body of people, and you want those people to implement a new thing, like first and foremost, like what's in it for them? What's the motivational factor for the individual to like drive that forward? So I like to be able to share that information because, well, for my own selfish mission, I wanted to talk to organizations because I wanted to get this information to a larger group of people quicker, and I didn't want people to have to pay for it, at
Mm,
least not the individual. So, the organization will take that on. So I'm like, excellent. This is like the things that we should have had, in our lives forever.
yeah.
Yay. And that's the driving factor for people to understand, to want to know. I mean, and you can take all the fluff and woo completely out of it. And instead, we're not, if you think not about period charting, that's a cool thing. But actually, if you flip it on its head and say, this is energy mapping,
Yeah.
and you can think of it even as another framework, you could think about Q1, 2, 3, 4 of your cycle. And what you're doing by mapping is getting a practical and like precise data that you can then correlate between cycles and use that data to be more effective, whatever you want to. You could literally
And
take all the woo out of it.
yeah,
And
and
yes,
and
you
more
can layer on the singing bowls
exactly.
and the crystals, but you don't have to.
And it's more strategic, right?
Yeah,
So if you think about if I'd have had the opportunity to map my energy as to what the bloody hell was going on for me in a November. Now, I understand that an organisation isn't likely to say, "Oh well, Bobby, we know that your energy is depleted, so you don't have to do your budget forecasting anymore." Unlikely, but that between us there is some kind of negotiation about what else I should be putting down so I can concentrate on what the important things are if my energy is depleted in that. So you can do that from an individual perspective, you can do that from a team perspective to make, who's better here than that, etc. So
yeah,
I agree with you.
yeah.
I quite like a singing bowl, to be honest. But if
I
that wasn't
mean, I may
if
have
that
two
wasn't
right
going to
next to
work,
me.
exactly. If that is not going to work for any of the organisations, I mean, God, I'd just love to imagine me going in with a singing bowl to some of the senior management teams I've had to do. But you're right. It can be turned into something that is very effective and makes perfect sense in terms of how an
Yeah,
organisation runs. So
yeah.
that was the first bit about education.
The second bit is I talk about ease, just as a shorter way to say, like, the psychological kind of safe space that you're creating. So, yeah, so there's menstrual education, menstrual ease, and that is focusing more on literally how are we having conversations about periods. So I cover lots of different things within that, to really kind of get people thinking, and to call out the banter, which is just a way to insult someone to their face, you know in a way that's called a joke. I mean, I don't like banter. I think that it can be really, really toxic when you're using like awful terms to, talk about somebody's, menstrual experience and then call it banter. That doesn't work for me. So yeah, calling out that, talking about the language that we use around periods, like how different language can just feed into that kind of shame and stigma when we use euphemisms to describe periods and things. And then looking at actually how we're having conversations, like how as an individual you might go to your manager to have a conversation, and equally how managers might broach that conversation. So yeah, quite a few things within that, but yeah, that's the part two of it.
I love all of that. I think what it brings me on to, and I wondered if you've got any examples that you could give here. So, we're saying here now, there are those progressive organisations out there who are grounded, open, and spacious enough to be having the conversations, one, to be educated and to learn more, and two, to actually then potentially be doing something practical about energy mapping. And as we're saying, let's bring the energy into it. And also the education about what's okay and what isn't okay from the psychological safety perspective and point. I'm wondering, because, I call myself the mischief ripple maker, that I
Mhm.
say it's one little ripple at a time, one little glimmer at a time. And people having aha moments like you did on the yoga mat that time ago, going, God, what have I been doing with my life, and why didn't I realize this? Do you have, without breaking any confidences, but any lovely stories about what it's been like for people when you've been talking to them, or when you see something being put into practice? Do you have anything like that where you go, there it is, it's happened? The thing that I wanted to come in and be purposeful about in the work that I now do, I can see it in terms of how that individual, how that team, the organisation, or whatever it might be, how are they now living as a result of what Samantha Garstin has brought to them?
So yeah, I always give out feedback form at the end, and sometimes the messages are just lovely. I mean, I can always tell, like at the end of a call, and the people that stay behind for Q&A, and that I I see it because it's what happened to me. It's that light bulb moment, and you can tell because their face is lit up, and I've just said something that's just made sense of their whole life experience, because that's what happened for me. That was that moment where my whole life was suddenly explained, and it's like, oh my God, and they get really excited about it. I absolutely love that. But I've had so many messages over the years of like people like, this has changed my life, it's made sense to me. Or I meet people and they're like, oh, I watched your workshop and I tell everyone about it, or I've told my girls about it, like I've got them like charting and tracking, and it just has this like knock-on effect. Had a really lovely feedback from a woman once whose daughter was really struggling with like difficult periods, and how useful that it's been. Her daughter had got to the point where she was like, I'd rather have my ovaries removed than like go through what
Oh
I'm doing.
Lord.
Like,
Yeah.
and trying to understand things differently, and maybe like applying a few things differently as like had been really helpful. I don't know, just, I mean, sure, there's the other ones, the not so nice ones that I get, but I would say like 98% is like so positive and just full of these like moments of realization and excitement in, actually now I can go forward and do things better for myself, and to kind of like make peace with those like other things. Because I think the thing for me, when I sort of really discovered cyclical living, which is this kind of process of working within the cycles, was that all the moments that I was hard on myself, that I sort of hated or berated myself, were came with the what's wrong with me?
Hmm.
Why can't I do it? Why can everyone else do it? What's wrong with me? And that has stopped. And that is huge for me as a person who is a recovering perfectionist and people pleaser. I think for anyone that's been that person, it's always like just there. You have to like have really strong boundaries. But I don't think that about myself anymore. And that was huge, I think, for me.
Mm. And I think that's interesting because it's both for yourself and for others, isn't it? Because we can talk about the glimmers, the ripples that we can see where our work has had that effect on others. And of course, sometimes that is later down the line. Sometimes we never even know about it. I often say that you almost have to get used to the fact that the work that you do is important. So you don't do it for applause. You're just going to do it anyway because
Yeah.
it's the right purpose for yourself. But equally, I hear you when you're talking about resistance and the resistance of others, or the slam door in your face with some of the things
Mm.
that we might want to be talking about, but also the resistance in self. And of course, what's wrong with me is a massive resistance, because there's got to be an answer as to why something isn't working. And again, going back to the body listening, we are both body listeners in different ways. You're coming at it from your angle and I come at it from mine with the somatics. But there is that level of, it doesn't necessarily bring certainty. We're not going, oh, it's because of this. Oh, it's because of this in the cycle. There's something to hold on to, but also that if it possibly could be this, that level of curiosity, then this is what I should be doing for myself. There's not necessarily something wrong with me. And I think that that's what you're pointing to. But did that take a while? And as we say, we're recovering perfectionists.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do for yourself on your off days when you can feel it creeping back in?
Good question. So, yeah, I am not too big to admit I have off days, which feels hard to sometimes say that as a person that teaches energy mapping and boundaries.
Yes. I often say that I should be struck with a bolt of lightning. I say certain things and then just check out in the sky that I'm not going to get whacked, because I don't always take my own advice very well.
Yeah, but it's so difficult as well. But no, I do. So it wasn't overnight. I mean, that kind of like aha moment, that was pretty much that was like, oh God, like I suddenly realized something massive. And after that moment, I obviously went and I scoured the globe for a facilitator training. I was like, bye
Yeah.
yoga. And then I was like, okay, cycle coach, here we come. So, and I studied, to teach this, and I got my coaching qualification. So through that process was very like eye-opening and kind of like really going into it and understanding this information. It took a while, like with any habit, but I'm so different in the way that I approach things. It's all with kindness and in like little bite-sized pieces and building micro habits and having forgiveness for the times when it didn't kind of work out right. And I kind of love that the thing about working with a cycle is that one cycle you'll try a thing and it might work well or it might not, but no
Mhm.
matter, you'll try it again the next cycle, and it's just this really gentle process of trialing, refining. How much can I push here? Like, how much rest do I need to take there? And just knowing like where you can layer on, like I always say, like where you can push and where you need to pause. And it takes a while to establish that understanding about your own individual cycle of energy and what that looks like for you. So yeah, it did take a while. I will say, even after I discovered this cyclical living practice, I still had these large moments of what I thought were like anxiety attacks or panic attacks. I didn't really understand it at the time. When I got my autism and ADHD diagnosis, I was like, oh, like those things, that was an autistic meltdown. That is what
Mm,
that was.
mm.
I was experiencing autistic burnout, and that was just a layering. I was strongly masking, layering on like expectations on myself. There's the sensory sensitivities, all of the things happening all at the same time, and not really understanding, and it would just get too much for me. So it was really clear to me, like when I got that diagnosis, why I had grabbed hold of cyclical living with both hands, because it was my first and most important kind of coping strategy to sort of deal with my energy. I think we learn all the time. Like I'm still learning like how much capacity that I have. And each cycle I go back and be like, oh, didn't really work out. And sometimes, it's like being in a lobster pot. You put on the things and you think that you're dealing with them, and then you'll get to a day and it'll be like, I'm not dealing well with this at all. And you have a moment and you're like, okay, that was too much. I'm not going to do that again. And as life changes, as our responsibilities change, as our commitments change, it will always be you go into a new thing and you're like, okay, I'll trial this situation and this level of commitment. And did that work? No, that was too much. I
Yeah.
won't do that again. And you learn where you need to build in like buffers to prepare, decompress. You'll know where your low tolerance phases are, and and they might be constantly tweaking. What worked for me 5 years ago isn't working for me now as a
Absolutely.
perimenopausal woman. Like my capacity is even smaller, and that catches me out. And like I said, I'm not too big to admit that, but I still have days where I'm like had a complete, like I call it the snot bubble meltdown, where you like on the kitchen floor, you're like, it's too much,
That's
and
a
I
hell of a visual. Jesus.
but there's nothing else that really describes it when you're just like, I did too much.
I'm just going to write that down because, of course, I love creating little cartoon AIs, and I'm just seeing you in a big snot bubble meltdown on LinkedIn. I won't do that to you, of
Yeah,
course.
as
But
long
yes,
as I'm in pink, I don't
as
mind.
long as you're in awake in the middle of it all. I love that. Right, okay. I'll just make a note of that as well. I think that's been, but back to the serious element, but you're right, because I think it's also integral that whilst there are these cycles that are going on, and some of the cycles we've been talking about, some of them are internal, some of them are external to ourselves. So that brings me to the question about what is actually in my control. And then, of course, there's else in the system as well, and how that affects. But within all of these episodes that we're having, which is about being between skins, being below the neck, change, transition, that we're never really showing up absolutely the same as we did the day before because of the circumstances or the environment or how we're feeling, that absolutely to actually have a structure but be forever in that curiosity and reflecting on it to see how you have to tweak it, I think is really important. I tell you that I have a question because I can't believe we're sort of like getting to the point of like, oh my God, we're running out of time. There's so much more to say. But you talk about studying to be a cycle coach. You talk about cyclical living practice. I wonder if there are any particular things that you could tell the audience about if they're interested to go and read, things to watch. Where did you start your practice from? An abundance of resources that we could give them to help them on their way.
Firstly, I will say I have a charting tool.
Lovely.
Which is a freebie. I have a charting tool that is for, everybody to sort of chart or map their energy, whether that's a period or a lunar energy type thing. And I also have one that is neurodivergent tailored. So it's a cyclical trait tracker. So you can map your cycle neurodivergent traits along with your hormonal shifts, because that really does have an impact. I have a lot to say on that. But there's so many incredible resources. Before I did my cycle coach training, I read Wild Power. That's by Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Wurlitzer. They are like some of the founders of this kind of work. I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit woo based. And
get with the woo in order to do. That's what we say.
Yes, absolutely. There is, in the same vein, there's a lovely book called Second Spring, which is by Kate Codrington, and she talks about cycles post-menopause, like going through the same cycle again, but in a post-menopause sort of world. That's very good. I'm just looking on my bookshelf. Okay. Oh, Lucy Pierce, I think it's called Moon Time.
Yeah,
that's about the cycle, and I really enjoyed that. That's probably a lighter read than Wild Power. It's a bit of a thinner book as well, and I think it might be slightly more accessible in tone.
And where did you do your cycle coaching as well? That's interesting as well.
I did it with Cycle Coach School. My mentor was called Claire Baker, and she trained originally with the Red School, who wrote Wild Power. So a lot of my understanding of things is informed through that. Actually, Claire Baker's written a lovely book, which is great, I think, for sort of teens, maybe, well, for everyone's understanding, actually. But it's called 50 Things You Need to Know About Periods. And that is a quite a small, nice book that sort of explains things and would be great for sort of teen understanding, I think. Everyone's, but, it's also the right tone.
Yeah, and also for some people that need to start from scratch as well.
Yeah, it just explains it in a really sort of accessible way, I would say.
Great.
I feel like I've got more, but if you wanted something particularly, if you're like, woo is not my thing, but I want to know about periods, the Period Repair Manual by Lara Bryden, or she's got a perimenopause one, the Hormone Repair Manual by Lara Bryden. They are very good and not woo at all.
Sounds great.
That is just the facts.
Manuals, the facts. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. I think that is all just fabulous. Thank you so much. So we are desperately, sadly, at our time. And I'm just wondering, because there's probably, there's a whole new track of this from the neurodivergent element that we have not had the opportunity to. So I may well be coming back to you and saying, Samantha, can you come on again? Because we want to do another one at another point in time. But is there anything else life affirming that, because of the way that I've done the questions or whatever, that we haven't got round to, that you want to sort of like leave people with before we finish?
I would say, I mean, there'll be some people that maybe like, I'm in. Give me the resources, I need to know more. There are maybe a few people sitting on the fence, and it doesn't have to be a whole practice. I mean, cycle charting, however you want to do it, is the right way for you. There are apps and things, but I prefer my charting tool because I like the tactile pen and paper thing. I keep a clipboard next to my bed. And it's not another thing to do, I would say that. Because all of this understanding, everything that I've spoken about, all pins on one practice. It's observing your body, however you choose to do that, whether it's, the charting or just taking a moment of a day to just close your eyes and take a body scan. I mean, this is right up your sort of expertise, Bobby. But yeah, just do a body scan. Just notice how your body feels and just move from that place, that informed place of, actually, I'm flagging. My body is screaming for me to stop down. Stop down? Slow down. Or stop down. Maybe that's more relevant.
I think it's a new one. Stop down.
Stop down. Yeah, because we push past that and be honest with yourself. Even if you're like, I'm not into all the tracking thing, like it's not my cup of tea, I would just say, take in 10 breaths, which is averagely a minute. 10 breaths. 10 breaths can change your world, from how you feel now to how you will feel after. And take 10 breaths just to scan through your body, 1 minute of your time, and move from that place. Let that inform your decisions and the things that you commit to. Yeah, okay. I could say so much more about that.
I love that, because you may well know that with More Than a Lumpy Jumper, Bridget is always going, okay, so what quote have you got for us now, Bob? But I think it aligns very nicely, because what you're talking about is being kind to your body, which is in its own rhythm and its own cycle, whether we like it or not. And because we'd started with this episode being called Being Moonlit to help us get into this, my quote is about the moon. But I love this because I think it says to the way that we should potentially contemplate how we should be with our bodies as well as a result of self-care. So here it is. And it says, the moon does not fight. It attacks no one. It does not worry. It does not try to crush others. It keeps to its course. But by its very nature, it gently influences.
I just got goosebumps.
That's deep, isn't it? I love it. Shall I say it again?
Yes.
The moon does not fight. It attacks no one. It does not worry. It does not try to crush others. It keeps to its course. But by its very nature, it gently influences. That'd be a lovely world, wouldn't it?
It's so true. And when you were saying that, when we do keep to our own course, by our nature, we gently influence others to do the same.
Absolutely.
We are the way showers for others. Yeah. Oh, that was beautiful.
Love that. Super. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And it's been so lovely to talk to you and to hear more about your wonderful work. And book her up, organisations, because she's definitely worth it of showing you the way. She definitely has shown me. So thank you very much. And it's been lovely having you here. Thanks so much for listening. As always, you'll find resources and links over on our website and Spotify page, where you can dig deeper into today's themes whenever it suits you. Now, still on the topic of pressure, next week we're switching gears to tackle the feeling that everything is urgent, everything matters, and everything needs doing now. We'll be joined by HR and leadership coach and creator of the Essential HR Planner, Faye Wallace, to explore how we prioritise when everything feels important. We're going to be talking about what practical tools can help you sort the noise from what really matters, how guilt, perfectionism and people-pleasing sneak into our to-do lists more often than we realise, and much more. So join us next time for Being Sharp, Not Busy, a conversation about focus, boundaries and building a way of work that actually works.